Welcome to Mimir Library, where timeless stories find their voice.
This is Chapter 4 of Waves Between Us by Amir Honarmand. Enjoy.
By mid-morning, Tatley mornings hummed with life. The wooden deck overflowed with customers, their conversations creating a pleasant buzz that mingled with the rhythmic crash of waves. The scent of sizzling gozleme and strong coffee hung in the air, occasionally swept away by a gentle sea breeze, only to be replaced by fresh aromas from Alara's kitchen. Alara moved through the controlled chaos with practiced precision. Her hands never faltered as she flipped a gozleme on the sock, the thin dough browning perfectly, while she simultaneously called out an order to Celine. There was a dance to the morning rush, a tempo she knew by heart, and today her steps felt particularly light. 2 spinach and feta for table 7, she announced, sliding the plates across the counter. Celine grabbed them with a dramatic flourish. "Coming right up, boss." As Alara turned back to the griddle, her gaze caught on Liam across the deck. Unlike earlier when they'd shared quiet conversation over dawn coffee, he was now fully immersed in his work. He crouched near the railing, capturing 2 elderly men hunched over a backgammon board, their weathered hands hovering over the pieces, faces intent with concentration. There was something different about the way he worked. Most tourists with cameras snapped the obvious, the sea, the food, themselves. Liam sought out moments instead. The slight smile of satisfaction when a customer took their first bite. The concentration on an old man's face as he contemplated his next move. The way sunlight filtered through the canvas awning to create patterns on the wooden floor. He glanced up suddenly, catching her watching him. Instead of quickly looking away, Alara found herself holding his gaze. He offered a small, almost conspiratorial smile that made her stomach flutter unexpectedly. It wasn't the polite smile of a business arrangement anymore. It carried the warmth of their sunrise conversation, of shared silver legacies. "Alara, the honey walnut is burning." She snapped back to attention, quickly rescuing the gozleme from the hot surface. It was slightly darker than ideal, but still perfectly edible. The momentary distraction annoyed her. She never burned food. For the next hour, Alara focused intently on her work, determined not to let her attention wander again. She kneaded dough with particular vigor, rolled it with precise movements, and tended the sock with unwavering concentration. Yet, somehow, she remained acutely aware of Liam's presence as he moved through the space. What was most surprising was how he seemed to anticipate her movements. When she turned with a tray of tea glasses, he was already stepping aside, though he'd been in her path a moment before. When she needed to reach past a customer, he'd shifted his angle to capture the moment without being in her way. They moved in a strange harmony, as if they'd worked together for years rather than hours. 3 ayan for table 4, she called, wiping her hands on her apron. As she turned to reach for the yogurt drink, she nearly collided with Celine, who was watching her with undisguised curiosity. "What?" Alara asked, reaching around her assistant for the pitcher. "Nothing," Celine replied with a knowing smile that suggested exactly the opposite. "Just noticing that our photographer friend hasn't taken his eyes off you for more than 30 seconds. I counted. Heat crept up Alara's neck. "Don't you have tables to attend to?" I'm going. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He is very handsome, Alara, and I think he's more interested in the owner than the oven." "Shh," Alara hissed, feeling the blush spread to her cheeks as she glanced around to make sure no one had overheard. "It's professional. Now go." Celine departed with a theatrical wink, leaving Alara flustered at the counter. She busied herself wiping down an already clean surface, trying to regain her composure. When she finally looked up, Liam was across the room, capturing a young girl's delight as she dipped bread into melted cheese. As if sensing her gaze, he turned. Their eyes met across the crowded cafe, and he gave her that same small smile, a private communication amid the bustle. Something warm and unexpected unfurled in her chest. For the remainder of the morning rush, Alara found herself moving with a new awareness, a heightened energy that made every task feel lighter. The cafe had always been her domain, her creation, but today it felt different, as if seeing it through Liam's lens had revealed new dimensions to the familiar space. When she delivered 2 glasses of ayan to a table near the railing, She caught him sight kneeling to capture the contrast between the white drink and the blue sea beyond. Without thinking, she adjusted the glasses slightly, improving the composition. He glanced up, surprised and appreciative. "Perfect," he mouthed silently. As their gazes held for a moment longer than necessary, Alara realized that something had shifted between them. The professional boundary she'd carefully established was blurring, replaced by something more fluid, more dangerous, and infinitely more exciting. The mid-morning calmness arrived like a welcome exhalation. The breakfast rush had subsided, leaving behind a comfortable hum of conversation from the handful of lingering customers. Alara wiped her hands on her apron and nodded to Selin. "I'm taking 15. You're good out here?" Go. Selin shooed her away with exaggerated motions. "I'll manage somehow without your constant hovering." Alara slipped through the swinging kitchen door and into her small office at the back of the cafe. The contrast between the bright open space of Tatli mornings and this tiny sanctuary was stark, but welcome. Here, sunlight filtered through a single small window, casting gentle patterns across the messy desk. Stacks of invoices competed for space with cookbooks, their pages marked with colorful tabs. A potted basil plant struggled valiantly on the windowsill, reaching toward what little sunlight made it through. She closed the door on the cheerful chaos beyond, savoring the sudden quiet. This cramped space, barely larger than a closet, was where she retreated when she needed to breathe, where the businesswoman could momentarily replace the hostess. Sinking into her creaky office chair, Alara pulled her phone from her pocket. The daily call to her mother was as much ritual as the morning's first coffee. She dialed, tucking the phone between ear and shoulder as she sorted through yesterday's receipts. "Kuzum!" Her mother's voice filled the small office warm and immediate, despite the physical distance between them. "I was just thinking about you." "You say that every time I call Anne," Alara replied, unable to keep the smile from her voice. "Because it's always true." Her laughter bubbled through the connection. "How is my hard-working daughter today? Have you eaten anything besides coffee?" "I had guzlame," Alara said, leaning back in her chair. "The spinach and feta batch came out particularly good today." "You need protein, not just cheese. Those bones won't stay strong on pastry and coffee." The familiar concern wrapped around Alara like a comfortable blanket. These conversations followed well-worn paths, comforting in their predictability. "How's the garden?" she asked, changing the subject. "Did the tomato plant survive the heat wave?" "They're thriving. Your father built a little shade structure. Very clever, though he won't admit I suggested it first." Isla's voice softened. "We miss you, Kuzum. The village is beautiful now, all the wildflowers on the hillside." They spoke of simple things, her father's ongoing battle with the neighbor's rooster, the new olive press in the village, a cousin's upcoming wedding. The conversation flowed easily, bridging the distance between Antalya's coast and the quiet inland village where her parents had retired. "Oh, I almost forgot," Isla said. "I found that supplier you mentioned. For the specialty flour? Mehmet's nephew knows him. I'll text you the number." "That would be perfect. The last batch was too rough." Alara twirled a pencil between her fingers, feeling unexpectedly cheerful. The morning sunrise, the easy rhythm she'd found with Liam, and the busy but successful breakfast service, all of it had left her with a warm glow of satisfaction. "Business is great, Mom." The words spilled out before she'd fully formed the thought. "There's a photographer here from a big travel magazine, doing a feature on the cafe." The momentary silence on the other end told Alara her mother had caught something in her tone, something beyond professional pride. A photographer. Isla's voice took on that particular note of maternal curiosity Alara knew too well. "From where?" "Ireland originally, but he works for an American magazine, Wonderlust." "Is he nice?" The innocent question carried layers of meaning between mother and daughter. "He's very professional," Alara replied carefully. "Respectful of the space. The customers like him." "Handsome?" Alara closed her eyes, knowing exactly where this was heading. Anne! What? It's a simple question. Yes, she admitted, feeling her cheeks warm despite being alone in the office. He's handsome, but that's not relevant to his work. The sound contained volumes of maternal speculation. Single? I didn't ask for his relationship status before agreeing to the photo shoot, Mother, but I had noticed the absence of a wedding ring, just the silver band on his other hand, his grandfather's legacy. How long is he staying? Just a few days for the assignment. Alara fiddled with her necklace, suddenly aware of how the conversation had shifted from business to something more personal. There was a pause. Then Isla's voice softened with a note of gentle concern. Listen to me, Kazum, she said, her tone warm but serious. He sounds lovely, but remember, these summer birds have wings. They enjoy our sun, but they always fly home for the winter. Just protect your heart. The word struck with unexpected precision. Alara felt a small, cold weight settle in her stomach, displacing some of the morning's warmth. It's strictly professional, Anne, she insisted with a light laugh that sounded forced even to her own ears. He takes pictures. I make gozleme. That's the extent of it. Of course, Isla agreed, too quickly. I just worry. After what happened with... I need to get back to work, Alara interrupted, not wanting to hear the name of her past mistake spoken aloud. Selling can't handle the counter alone for too long. They exchanged quick goodbyes, her mother extracting a promise for another call tomorrow. As Alara ended the connection, she sat motionless, staring at the phone in her hand. Summer birds have wings. The phrase echoed in the quiet office, taking root despite her efforts to dismiss it. She stood abruptly, tucking her phone away and straightening her apron with more force than necessary. It's just business, she muttered to the empty room, the same words she'd repeated to herself since agreeing to Liam's proposal. But as she reached for the door handle, ready to step back into the bright, busy world of her cafe, the weight of her mother's gentle warning lingered. The morning's easy connection with Liam, the shared silence watching the sunrise, the unexpected parallel of their silver heirlooms, suddenly felt dangerous rather than promising. Summer birds have wings. They enjoy our sun, but they always fly home for the winter. Alara took a deep breath and pushed open the door, stepping back into the warm light and cheerful noise of Tatli mornings. Across the room, Liam looked up from his camera, catching her eye with that now familiar smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Her heart gave a small, treacherous leap in response, even as her mother's words settled deeper, planting the first tiny seed of doubt. The afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the tiled floor of Tatli mornings. The lunch rush had faded away, leaving behind a comfortable quiet accompanied by the occasional clink of dishes and murmured conversations from the few lingering customers on the deck. Alara knelt in the cramped space beneath the main sink, holding a flashlight while Mete's broad shoulders blocked most of her view. The persistent drip that had been plaguing her for weeks had finally become to a steady trickle, forcing her to call in reinforcements. "Can you see it now?" she asked, shifting the beam of light slightly to the left. "Almost got it," Mete grunted, his voice echoing in the confined space. The wrench in his hand made a metallic squeak as he tightened a fitting. "Hand me that smaller wrench." Alara reached into the toolbox beside her knee, fingers finding the cool metal tool by touch alone. This dance was familiar. They'd performed it countless times over the years, from the earliest days when she'd first transformed the run-down shack into her cafe. "Here," she said, pressing it into her outstretched palm. Their hands brushed briefly, a casual contact born of years of friendship. "So," Mete said, his voice deliberately casual as he worked the wrench onto a stubborn bolt. "Your photographer is still here." Alara's eyes flicked toward the kitchen doorway. Through it, she could see Liam on the deck, crouched at eye level with a little girl of perhaps 6 or 7, He was showing her his camera, his expression animated as he explained something that made the child's eyes widen with delight. The girl's parents watched from a nearby cable, smiling at the interaction. "He's on assignment for 3 days," Alara replied, keeping her voice neutral. "Today's only day 2. Mete made a non-committal sound, the wrench squeaking as he applied more pressure. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple, despite the relative coolness beneath the sink. "He's good with people," Alara found herself adding, a soft smile touching her lips as she watched Liam carefully place his expensive camera in the little girl's hands, guiding her fingers to the shutter button. Mete paused in his work, following her gaze through the doorway. His expression remained carefully neutral as he watched the scene for a moment. "He seems nice enough," he finally said, turning back to the pipe and giving the wrench another forceful twist. His voice was measured, deliberately even. "The customers seemed to like him." The pipe gave a final groan of protest before surrendering to Mete's expertise. The dripping stopped, leaving behind blessed silence. "That should hold it," he said, sliding out from under the sink and sitting up. He wiped his hands on a rag, not meeting Alara's eyes. "For now, anyway. These old pipes need replacing, not just patching." "Like everything else around here," Alara sighed, gesturing to the ancient sink. "One emergency at a time." Mete nodded, his eyes drifting back to the doorway where Liam was now sitting at a table, reviewing his shots on his camera's display. The afternoon sun caught in his hair, giving him a golden halo. He looked up, as if sensing her gaze, and smiled that warm, genuine smile that had been working its way past her defenses all day. She tried to smile back, but Mete's words echoed too loudly in her mind. "He's capturing a moment, Alara. You're living a life." The gentle sorrow that had been planted by her mother's call now bloomed fully, rooted in the specific memory of another charming visitor who had found her world fascinating, until he didn't anymore. Alara rose slowly from the floor, placing the flashlight on the counter with deliberate care. The magic of the morning, the shared sunrise, the connection over silver heirlooms suddenly felt like the beginning of a story she'd read before, one that ended her alone again, watching someone walk away with pieces of her world packed neatly into their luggage. A story captured, appreciated, and ultimately left behind.
The story ends here, but the library is always open. Subscribe for more free audiobooks.